Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 154. Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse. Shota's not sure who managed it, Yagi or Shinso, but ever since Tuesday, Izuku had been in much better spirits. He'd sent Yagi after the kid, and then he'd gone home with Shinso after school. It was a 50-50 shot for who turned his mood around, but he was leaning toward the latter. If he were Izuku, he would imagine that talking to a friend would be much less stressful than talking to an adult, especially one as idolized as All Might. With things just barely having gotten better, he was hesitant to risk opening another wound by poking into his previous school, but it had to be done. Yue's name bolstered enough authority to get things moving rather swiftly. His request for Izuku's records from Aldera Junior High had been fulfilled by the end of the day. They were, at first glance, unremarkable. His grades were oddly low for the level of intelligence that Shota knew he had, but they weren't failing. Plus, he knew far too well the amount of stress the poor kid was under outside of school, so the grades could be overlooked. But something about that didn't sit right with him. He'd put a pin in that thought for now. Something that far more overtly seemed out of place was the number of disciplinary actions taken against him. He couldn't imagine Izuku doing a damn thing to earn him any sort of disciplinary action, but his file stated that he had served detentions practically every other month. He could see Ivy getting detentions like that, but not Izuku. And he highly doubted that the kid walked into a middle school cussing out his teachers. No, that honor had been saved for him and Tsukachi. It really was an honor now that he thought about it. The chance to see that side of Izuku was rare. But that wasn't important right now. What was important, however, was an extended leave of absence that was listed to be granted by the nurse on staff, meaning that the injury either happened at school or was discovered there, both of which should have prompted enough of an investigation to uncover the kid's living conditions. Brilliant, because the kid didn't have enough negligent adults in his life already, did he? He knew he was going to have to pay the school a visit, but evidence of just how bad it could have been did not bode well. He had hoped the situation wasn't going to be too dissimilar to Shinso-san's, where Izuku was far too clever for his own good and manipulated well-meaning adults into looking the other way. But an injury that prompted a full week's absence without any record of investigation didn't fit that bill. There could have been some misunderstanding or missing documentation, but he wasn't holding out much hope for that. If he moved around his schedule slightly, he would have time Thursday afternoon to go check things out in person. There had been enough delays in this case because of him, so he wasted no time in making the arrangements. Nothing about Aldera Junior High looked out of place upon first inspection. The grounds were well maintained, and the building had a suitable enough security system, which was to say the secretary needed to buzz Shota in at the gate as well as at the front door. It wasn't exactly Fort Knox, but at least random people couldn't just walk in. Overall, it seemed incredibly unremarkable. He hoped against all logic that it would stay that way. Good morning, Aizawa-san. The principal should be out any minute. I've let him know that you've arrived. The secretary greeted him as he walked into the main office. He silently nodded his thanks and took a few steps to the side so as to not loom over her as he waited. There were security cameras outside, and he'd spotted one on the ceiling aimed at the main entrance as well. Hopefully they kept logs of past footage, or better yet, hopefully he wouldn't need that in the first place. The principal here had been in his position for the past 13 years, so the entirety of Izuku's tenure in the school district. He knew most principals weren't quite as involved as Nedzu, but Shota was hoping he knew enough about his students to be of use. Ah, Aizawa, right? Good afternoon. A portly man stepped out of a room down the short hall and greeted him. Afternoon, Naoki-san. He nodded back politely. Come, join me in my office. He beckoned Shota forth. You were the one to request the records on Midoriya Izuku, Naoki asked in a tone just left of neutral. He seemed to have some opinion formed of Izuku already. Whether it was positive or negative was difficult to say. He should remain impartial until he got a better feel of the situation. Yes, I am. He's a very remarkable student. He baited, his natural monotone aiding him by way of letting the statement be vague in whether it was sarcastic or earnest. Naoki laughed bitterly. That's certainly one way of putting it, he agreed conspiratorially. Damn it, why the hell was everyone in this kid's life out to get him? Was he just the universe's scapegoat? He just barely managed to keep himself from taking an audibly deep breath as he fought the urge to strangle the man with his own poorly fastened tie. Quite. Hence why I'd like more information on his past schooling and his teacher's experiences with him. He replied with no inflection. Yes, of course. I was quite surprised to see he got accepted into UA in the first place. The man mused as he clicked away on his computer for a moment. Shota bit his tongue and waited to see what Naoki was doing. The printer whirred to life behind him shortly thereafter. Here is a list of his past teachers and their current room numbers. Many of them have classes going right now, so I'm not sure how much of their time you'll be able to get. But you could at least exchange contact information, I'm sure, he explained with a pleasant grin, passing the sheet of paper over the desk to Shota. Thank you for making this investigation so easy for me now, Naoki-san, he replied, taking satisfaction in the untold honesty of that statement. Yes, of course. Anything I can do to help the heroes of tomorrow, he replied cluelessly. Would you like an escort around the school, or do you think you can find your own way? There's signs all over the place, and the room numbers are pretty straightforward. I'm sure I can manage on my own, he assured him with one last forced polite nod before taking his leave. Why couldn't this kid have had one singular safe place in his life? Shota wasn't sure what all they were hiding here, but he wasn't going to push his luck today. Playing nice and coming back with a warrant was the only way forward. If he gave off even the slightest hint that this was an investigation into the school and not Izuku, then they would clam up and give him nothing. He gave himself a moment to finally take a theatrically large, calming breath or two once he had rounded the corner away from the office. Schmoozing wasn't his preferred method of investigation, but he knew from practice that it could get you quite far. He just needed to keep his cool. Once he felt more confident in his ability to not strangle the next adult he saw, he headed for the farthest room on the list, the classroom of one Morita Hachiro, one of the two PE teachers they had on staff. If anyone was likely to notice an injury, it would be the PE teachers. Hopefully, he would be able to shed light on the situation. He ended up having to trek out to the back of the school to find him. He was watching over what appeared to be a game of American football. What a strange choice of activity. Morita-san? He asked as he approached the only adult person. Yes, that's me, the man answered. I don't know how widespread the information is yet. I'm a representative from UA looking into one of our students, Midoriya Izuku. Naoki-san said you were a former teacher of his. Oh, yes, I was. Morita responded in a way that didn't reveal a damn thing. How did Midoriya behave while under your watch? He asked, hoping to keep focus on Izuku and not the school. Is he under some sort of investigation? Morita asked incredulously. Legally, I can neither confirm nor deny that, but I will say there are a few things about him that don't add up on paper. He gave a calculated response. Huh. Well, he was pretty unremarkable as far as I can remember. He wasn't very athletic, kind of a wallflower. I was really surprised to hear he got into UA. The whole staff was. We thought it was a joke, but, well, good for him, I suppose, right? He said with a nonchalant smile. Morita was not talking about Izuku the same way that Naoki was. He didn't seem to have any sort of ill will at all. So this left three options. One, this man was an incredible actor. Two, Shota had completely misread the situation and any perceived biases that the staff had against Midoriya. Or three, this man was completely oblivious and genuinely had no clue what Shota was trying to get at. He was leaning toward option number three. Maybe it would help to lead him by the hand a little bit more. His file lists a troubling history of disciplinary actions. Did you witness anything like that? Oh, yeah, he tended to rile up the other kids whenever he did talk to them, which tended to end up in fights. He never seemed to learn his lessons, he said with a good-natured laugh. Did that ever happen in your classes? Did it? Let me think. Oh, yeah. I had to send him to the nurse once, and he ended up out of school for a week. I feel kind of bad about that one now, but he was a stubborn kid and wouldn't let me see the injury, so there wasn't much I could do. Do you remember what caused the injury? Shota asked, doing his level best to not forcibly jog this man's memory. I, hmm, we were out here when it happened. I remember that. He was, yeah, he was covering it with his arms and he refused to move them, so it was on his chest, maybe a broken rib. I don't remember. It was years ago at this point. The nurse might remember. You could try asking her. Oh, damn it. Did they just score again? Did I miss a touchdown? Wait, what are we at? Like 12-6? No. Give it another go. Second yard line. Morita mused half to himself and half to Shota before shouting directions at his class. Did I miss a score? They always forget about the PATs. Those are two, no, one, wait, he continued mumbling. Shota had no clue what he was talking about, and it only seemed like Morita himself only half knew what he was talking about. He was counting on his fingers and looking up at the clouds with a furrowed brow like he was putting a lot of effort forth in the proceedings. Yeah, it seemed like option number three. This man is a dumbass, was the most likely answer. Thank you for your time, Morita-san. He dismissed himself with no preamble. Morita just waved him off as he continued his intense mental maths. Surely the nurse would have a more detailed memory of injuries that happened under her watch. He made his way back to the front of the school where he had seen a sign pointing toward the nurse's office and soon came face to face with a woman who could have passed for Chio's evil twin. She was a short, stout old woman with her graying hair pulled back into a bun, and she had a scowl that seemed to be permanently etched into her face. Midoriya. Yes, I remember him. Always getting into trouble, she said when he explained why he was disturbing her. So I have heard. Do you remember the incident that happened 3 years ago? We're trying to clear up allegations at the moment. He was injured in gym class and sent here. Then you granted him leave for a week. He prompted. Oh, that. Yes. I think it was a burn, a quirk mishap. I don't really know. His mother is a nurse. She took care of it. She answered without looking up from her computer. She was doing a passable impression of someone who was diligently working, but he could see the reflection of a game of solitaire in her glasses. A burn from a quirk mishap that resulted in Ivy taking a week off of patrol of their own volition? Yes, he's sure that Izuku's mother took very good care of that from across the ocean. Any further interaction with this woman was going to result in Shota screaming at her for incompetence at best and malicious negligence at worst. So he elected to cut his questioning off there. Thank you for your time, Shishido-san. She just hummed in response and didn't bother with any sort of polite dismissal. Why the hell was she still working this job that she clearly had no interest in? She looked like she was primed to retire 15 years ago. Whatever, it didn't matter. Well, it did, but thinking about things that were just going to piss him off more wasn't helpful, so he brushed the thought aside. He still had time to talk to a few more people, but it was starting to seem like he wasn't going to get much more information without a warrant. He didn't usually have much of an issue putting aside his feelings and playing whatever role was required to get the information he needed, but he was too personally invested in this case. It seemed he didn't have the strength of will required to lay back and agree with all these people about how Izuku was such a nuisance. One more person. He could talk to one more person, and then he'd leave. Izuku's previous homeroom teacher seemed as good a choice as any, so he made his way to the classroom listed. He knocked briefly and opened the door, not bothering to wait for an answer. A blond man was sitting at the front of a class who appeared to be taking a test, if the volume level was anything to go by. Ogami-san? Yes. The man in question looked him up and down with mild disdain. I'm a representative from UA. I have some questions for you. I trust your class will remain on their best behavior if you step out for a moment. He spoke up with a clear threat in his tone as he looked over the group of students. Most of them looked suitably spooked, but he could see a few faces glancing around as if they were searching for an ally to cause trouble with. Of course, that's up to them. I'll be sure to let you know if they decide to break that trust, he added, flaring his quirk up for a split second, long enough to threaten, but not long enough for anyone to realize what his quirk actually did. The few students who had been looking around resolutely settled their gazes on the papers in front of them after that. Good. Ogami shot a look over his class, seemingly scanning it for trouble, before deciding that Shota's threats appeared to be working as intended. Shota ducked back out into the hallway and waited for the other man to join him. The man had already judged Shota based on his appearance, so he didn't have high hopes for his moral integrity. He didn't expect to come out of this conversation any less angry than he'd entered it. Hello, Aizawa. Hello, Aizawa-san. To what do I owe the pleasure? I have concerns about one of my students. Records not quite adding up on paper, things swept under the rug, stuff like that. I was told you were his homeroom teacher last year. He baited the hook again through figurative, gritted teeth. Oh yes, I was. Both students from Aldera Junior High came from my class, actually, he said smugly, as if the stuffy academic had anything to do with his students passing the hero course's entrance exam. Those two were always at each other's throat. I'm not surprised things haven't changed. I assume you're talking about Midoriya. Bakugo. How had he already forgotten about Bakugo? God, with everything going on, the bullying at the beginning of the year had completely slipped his mind. It seemed so trivial in comparison to everything else. It was Bakugo, wasn't it? The burn that had Ivy out of commission for a week? Bakugo had done that. He had hurt Izuku badly enough that he'd forced him away from the only things that made him happy. Yes, I am. He forced out a reply. Figures. The boy was a habitual liar, always riling his classmates up. He pretended to be quirkless for 11 years and didn't have any friends because of it. I'm not really sure why he did it. Of all the things to lie about, right? There's something to be said about dedication, I suppose. I assume it was for attention, but why he'd want the attention that being a null gave him is beyond me. He's a very troubled individual, and no amount of intervention seemed to help. Ogami ranted. He pretended he was quirkless. He trailed off, his mind too overwhelmed with the current of vitriol spewing from this man's mouth. Yeah, it was the strangest thing. When we all saw the sports festival, we were speechless. Half of us still thought he was lying about getting into UA in the first place. I mean, the kid was spineless. He let everyone walk all over him for years, and he could have flicked them down the block. Maybe he just wanted to be an underdog, or he liked playing the victim or something. I really don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but he's certainly one of the strangest kids I have ever worked with, and I've been at this for over 20 years, he said with a laugh. Shota had to bite down on his tongue hard enough that he tasted blood to keep himself from outwardly reacting to Ogami's words. This was so clearly not the Izuku he knew. The way this man spoke about him with such disdain made his skin crawl. What did he mean? He pretended to be quirkless. And why the hell did this man think it was appropriate to call a child a slur in any context? Moreover, what the frick did he mean that no amount of intervention helped? Any amount of intervention would have helped. He needed to get evidence out of this man, an admission, anything. But his hands were clenched into fists, and it was taking all he had not to punch him in the face. Okay. Deep breath in. Think like a bigot. Deep breath out. The awkward silence was stretching on too long. He needed to play into it, or he was going to lose his chance. That doesn't sound like the kid I have in my class. There's something off about him, though, so I don't doubt it. I've been running myself ragged trying to deal with his eccentricities, but I'm at my wit's end. I would have just expelled him by now, but you saw the sports festival. He's got an incredible quirk. I'd hate to see it go to waste. How did you keep him in line? He asked, hoping that he kept the anger from seeping out into his tone. Oh, well, his peers did most of the work. He made a social pariah out of himself, and we generally just left them to it. I feel kind of bad about it in hindsight. He's clearly mentally disturbed, putting himself through all that for no good reason. It took a whole village, as the saying goes, but I suppose your village doesn't have the same motivations now that he's dropped the act. Have you spoken to his parents? They might have a better idea. Blatant admission of negligence. Great. Good. That was wonderful. Though it didn't excuse anything, he was starting to understand why Bakugo acted the way he did. We've been in contact, but I can't speak so candidly about his issues with them. He lied through his teeth. Oh, yeah, parents with their rose-colored glasses. No, there's nothing wrong with my little terror, he added in a mocking tone. That makes sense if he's getting enabled at home. Anyway, I should get back to my class. I trust them about as far as I can throw them. Did you need anything else? Nothing urgent. Naoki has my contact information if you can think of any helpful tips, he reluctantly admitted. Ideally, he would never hear from or see this man again unless it was in a courtroom. But if he wanted to offer more evidence, then who was Shota to stop him? Understood. Good luck with that one, Ogami said with a laugh and ducked back into his classroom. If that man didn't lose his license at the very least by the end of this case, Shota was going to kill him himself. Why was this school employed by misandrists and idiots? Why would Izuku pretend to be quirkless, quote unquote, and why did everything in that kid's life have to be so remarkably screwed up? End of chapter.